The kitchen smelled like cinnamon rolls when I checked my phone that Thursday morning. My hands were covered in flour, and I was trying to perfect the recipe for the church bake sale. Then I saw it. The text from Derek, my husband of 12 years. Your paranoid mom sees problems everywhere. Can you please talk to her? She's driving me insane with her theories. I stared at those words. My mother, Linda, had always been protective. Maybe too protective. She questioned everything, noticed details others missed, and yes, she worried. A lot. But paranoid? That felt cruel. I wiped my hands on my apron and called him. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice tight with frustration. Why are you calling? I'm in a meeting. Derek, that text was harsh. What happened? He sighed loudly. Your mother cornered me yesterday at your house. Started asking bizarre questions about my schedule, about where I go after work, about my new assistant. It's uncomfortable, Sarah. She treats me like I'm some criminal. She's just concerned. You know how she is. Concerned? He laughed without humor. She's obsessed. Last week she asked our neighbor if he'd seen any strange cars on our street. She's making us look crazy. I felt my chest tighten. My mother lived 3 blocks away in her small craftsman house, the same one where I grew up. After my father died 5 years ago, she'd become more vigilant about everything. She read true crime books, watched investigation shows, and kept detailed notes about neighborhood activities. I'll talk to her, I promised. Thank you. Look, I have to go. Love you. The line went dead before I could respond. I drove to my mother's house that afternoon. She was in her garden, wearing her wide-brimmed hat and floral gloves, tending to her roses. When she saw me, her face lit up. Sarah, what a lovely surprise. We need to talk, Mom. Her smile faded. She pulled off her gloves slowly. Is this about Derek? Yes. He says you've been asking him uncomfortable questions. She looked toward the street, then back at me. Let's go inside. Her living room was immaculate as always. Photos of our family covered every surface. My wedding picture sat on the mantel, Derek and me smiling under an arch of white flowers. That day felt like a lifetime ago. My mother sat across from me, her hands folded in her lap. I know you think I'm overreacting. Mom, Derek feels like you don't trust him. I don't. Those 2 words hung in the air between us. I felt anger rise in my throat. That's not fair. He's been nothing but good to me. To us. He helped you fix your roof last summer. He drives you to doctor appointments. I know what he does, Sarah. I also know what I've seen. What have you seen? She stood and walked to her desk. From a drawer, she pulled out a small notebook, the kind she used for her grocery lists. But this wasn't about groceries. Page after page was filled with dates, times, locations. My stomach turned. 3 weeks ago, Derek told you he was working late. I drove past his office at 8:30. His car wasn't there. Maybe he parked somewhere else. She flipped the page. Last Tuesday, he said he had a business dinner downtown. I saw his car at the Riverside Inn. That's not downtown, Sarah. That's 30 minutes outside the city. You followed him? I verified information. There's a difference. I grabbed the notebook from her hands. This is insane, Mom. You can't spy on my husband. Her eyes filled with tears, but her voice stayed steady. I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to protect you. Something is wrong, and I need you to see it. I stood up, clutching the notebook. You need help. This obsession isn't healthy. Sarah, please listen. No, Mom. You listen. My marriage is fine. Derek is stressed at work, and the last thing he needs is my mother playing detective. I need you to stop. I left her house with the notebook, planning to throw it away. But as I drove home, curiosity pulled at me. At a red light, I opened it again. The entries were meticulous. Dates, times, car locations, even descriptions of places. My mother had been tracking Derek's movements for over 2 months. One entry caught my eye. November 3rd. Derek's car at 2847 Maple Drive. Stayed 2 hours. Woman came out with him. Blonde. Late 20s. They stood close. Too close. My hands shook. The light turned green, and someone honked behind me. I drove home in a daze, the notebook on my passenger seat like a bomb waiting to explode. That night, Derek came home late again. He kissed my forehead, loosened his tie, and headed straight for the shower. I sat on our bed, the notebook hidden in my nightstand drawer, burning a hole through the wood. When he emerged, his hair damp and smelling like expensive soap, I tried to sound casual. How was work? Exhausting. He collapsed beside me. This new project is killing me. I barely have time to breathe. Maybe you should take a day off. We could do something together. He glanced at his phone. Maybe next month. Things should calm down by then. Next month. Always next month. I watched him scroll through emails, his face illuminated by the blue light. When did he become a stranger in our bed? The next morning I called in sick to work. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that my mother's paranoia was infecting me. But I couldn't stop thinking about that address. 2847 Maple Drive. I drove there. It was a neighborhood I didn't recognize 20 minutes from our house. Neat lawns, two-story homes with modern architecture. Nothing sinister, nothing obvious. Number 2847 was a gray house with white shutters. A silver Honda sat in the driveway. I parked across the street, feeling foolish. What was I doing? Spying on an empty house based on my mother's notes? Then the front door opened. A woman stepped out. Blonde hair pulled into a ponytail, athletic build, wearing yoga pants and a fitted jacket. She looked young, maybe 27 or 28. She walked to her car with confidence, checking her phone as she unlocked the door. My heart pounded. Who was she? I followed her. She drove to a coffee shop downtown, the same one Derek sometimes mentioned. She ordered at the counter, laughed with the barista, and sat by the window with her laptop. I watched from my car like a crazy person, like my mother. My phone buzzed. Derek. Hey babe, working through lunch today. Don't wait up for dinner either. This proposal needs to be done by tomorrow. I stared at his message, then at the blonde woman typing on her laptop, sipping her latte, completely unaware that I existed. When she left, I followed her again. She went to a gym, spent an hour inside, then drove back to the gray house on Maple Drive. I sat there until the sun began to set, waiting for something to happen, waiting for proof, waiting for my world to either shatter or stabilize. At 7:15, a car pulled into her driveway. Derek's black BMW. My breath stopped. I watched him get out carrying flowers. Yellow roses. My favorite flowers. He walked to her door like he'd done it 100 times before. She opened it, smiled, and stepped aside to let him in. The door closed, contained quarterly reports, financial statements, and a summary that made Margaret's blood run cold. TechFlow Solutions was on the verge of bankruptcy. Derek had been hiding the losses from Emily, taking predatory loans from questionable sources, and according to Robert's investigation, he was now attempting to sell the company to a venture capital firm for pennies on the dollar. A sale that would leave Emily with nothing but debt. Margaret stared at the screen, her mind racing. Derek's behavior suddenly made perfect sense. He wasn't trying to establish independence. He was trying to hide a disaster. Margaret spent the next morning on the phone with Robert, going through every document, every clause, every signature. The picture became clearer and more disturbing with each revelation. 3 years ago, when Derek's startup was just an idea and he couldn't secure funding anywhere, Margaret had stepped in. She had liquidated part of her retirement savings, money her late husband had left her, and invested $75,000 into TechFlow Solutions. But she hadn't done it blindly. Robert had drafted the paperwork. Margaret owned 40% of the company. Derek had been so desperate for capital that he had signed without fully reading the terms. He probably thought a retired drama teacher wouldn't understand business structures, that she'd be a silent partner who'd never ask questions. He had been wrong. Mom, what are you doing here? Margaret stood on the steps of TechFlow Solutions' small office in Manhattan. Emily had just arrived for what looked like an emergency meeting, based on the number of expensive cars parked outside. I'm here for the shareholders' meeting, Margaret said calmly. Emily's face went pale. What shareholders' meeting? The one Derek called this morning. Didn't he tell you? Before Emily could answer, Derek appeared at the door. His confident expression faltered when he saw Margaret. "Margaret, this is a business meeting. You need to leave. I'm a 40% shareholder, Derek. I have every right to be here." The color drained from Derek's face. Behind him, two men in suits emerged, the venture capital investors ready to buy his failing company. "What is she talking about?" Emily's voice was barely a whisper. Margaret reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. Inside were the original investment documents, all bearing Derek's signature. "3 years ago, your husband needed money to start his company. I gave him $75,000. In exchange, I received 40% ownership. He never told you, did he?" Emily looked at Derek, whose jaw was clenched tight. "You took money from my mother? After everything you said about her interfering?" "It was a business transaction," Derek said defensively. "A business transaction you hid from your wife," Margaret added. "Just like you hid the fact that you're trying to sell this company for $300,000 when it's drowning in $800,000 of debt. A sale that would destroy Emily financially." One of the investors cleared his throat. "Mr. Morrison, is this true? You didn't disclose all shareholders?" Derek's facade crumbled. The confident entrepreneur disappeared, replaced by a desperate man whose lies were unraveling in real time. "Emily, I can explain." But Emily was staring at Margaret with a mixture of shock, confusion, and something else. Recognition. Her mother hadn't been dramatic or controlling. She had been protecting her all along. Margaret turned to the investors. "Gentlemen, as majority stakeholder when combined with my daughter's marital interest in this company, I'm rejecting this sale. We'll be restructuring TechFlow Solutions with proper oversight and transparency." Derek's world was collapsing, and this time, there was no one else to blame. The investors left within minutes, their interest in TechFlow Solutions evaporating once they understood the true complexity of the ownership structure. Derek stood in the doorway of his office, speechless, as Margaret and Emily stepped inside. The office was smaller than Margaret had imagined. Motivational posters lined the walls, but they felt hollow now, like props in a performance that had finally ended. "How long have you known?" Emily asked her mother, her voice steadier than before. "About the investment?" "Since the beginning." "About the financial troubles?" "Robert alerted me 2 weeks ago. I've been investigating ever since." Derek finally found his voice. "You had no right to spy on my company." Margaret turned to face him, her expression calm but firm. "I had every right. I'm an investor, and more importantly, I'm Emily's mother. When I saw you isolating her, hiding information, and preparing to make a decision that would financially ruin my daughter, I acted." Emily sat down in one of the office chairs, processing everything. "So when you questioned the expansion at dinner, you already knew the company was failing?" "I knew enough to be concerned. I wanted to give you a chance to tell me yourself, to involve Emily in the decision-making. Instead, Derek chose to attack me and push me away." Derek ran his hands through his hair, the fight draining out of him. "I was trying to fix it before anyone found out. The product launch failed. We lost our biggest client. I thought I could turn it around. By taking predatory loans? By mortgaging the home you share with my daughter without her full knowledge? That's not fixing things, Derek. That's digging a deeper hole." Emily looked at her husband with eyes that no longer held the same trust. "You called my mom dramatic. You made me feel guilty for talking to her. But she was right about everything, wasn't she?" Derek couldn't meet her gaze. "I'm sorry. I was ashamed. I didn't want to admit I was failing." "Failing isn't the problem," Margaret said quietly. "Lying is. Isolating Emily is. Blaming others for your mistakes is." The room fell silent. Outside, the Manhattan afternoon traffic hummed, indifferent to the small human drama playing out in this modest office. "What happens now?" Emily finally asked. Margaret pulled out another document from her folder. "I spoke with Robert this morning. We have options. We can bring in proper financial management, restructure the debt, and possibly save the company. But it requires transparency, accountability, and Derek stepping back from solo decision-making." "You want to take over my company," Derek said bitterly. "No, I want to save my daughter from your pride. There's a difference." Emily stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. When she turned back, there was a new strength in her posture. Derek, I love you, but I can't be in a marriage where I'm kept in the dark, where my mother is vilified for caring about me, where our financial future is gambled without my knowledge. Emily, please, I need time, and you need to decide if you want to save this marriage as much as you wanted to save your ego. Margaret watched her daughter walk out of the office with her head held high and felt a bittersweet pride wash over her. 18 months later, Margaret stood in the newly renovated office of TechFlow Solutions, now relocated to a bright space in Brooklyn with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the East River. The autumn sun streamed through the glass, warming her face. The company had survived. Barely, but it had survived. With proper financial oversight from Robert and a complete restructuring of the business model, TechFlow had pivoted from their failed product to consulting services, leveraging Derek's technical knowledge in a more sustainable way. The predatory loans had been consolidated and were being paid down methodically. The apartment mortgage had been refinanced with better terms. But the real transformation hadn't been in the business. It had been in the people. Mom, they're ready for you. Emily appeared in the doorway, wearing a sharp business suit. She had joined TechFlow 6 months ago as Chief Operating Officer, bringing organizational skills and financial literacy that the company had desperately needed. The dark circles under her eyes were gone, replaced by a confidence Margaret hadn't seen in years. Margaret followed her daughter into the conference room where Derek sat with their small team of 5 employees. When Derek saw Margaret, he stood up. Margaret, thank you for coming. The formality between them had softened over the months, though it would never be the easy warmth Margaret had once hoped for with her son-in-law. Some bridges, once burned, could only be rebuilt, never restored to their original form. I wanted you to see this, Derek said, sliding a document across the table. We just secured our first major contract. It's enough to put us solidly in the black for the year. Margaret looked at the contract, then at Emily, who was smiling with genuine pride. That's wonderful. You've all worked incredibly hard. We couldn't have done it without your investment, Derek continued, and his voice carried a humility that hadn't been there before. Not just the money, the accountability, the structure. I was drowning and too proud to admit it. Pride can be expensive, Margaret said gently. After the meeting, Margaret and Emily walked along the waterfront, the October breeze carrying the scent of the river. They stopped at a bench overlooking the Brooklyn Bridge. How are things? Margaret asked. Really? Emily was quiet for a moment. We're in counseling. It's hard. Some days I'm angry all over again about the lies. But Derek is trying. Actually trying, not just performing. And you? Are you happy? I'm building something, Mom. The company, yes, but also myself. I forgot who I was for a while, trying to be the wife Derek wanted, trying to prove you wrong about your concerns. I lost myself in the process. Margaret took her daughter's hand. You were never lost, sweetheart. Just temporarily off course. Emily squeezed back. Thank you for not letting go. Even when I pushed you away. That's what mothers do. We hold on even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. They sat in comfortable silence, watching boats drift past on the river. Margaret thought about that Sunday dinner 18 months ago. Derek's angry words. The fear that she had lost her daughter forever. Your dramatic mom ruins everything, he had said. But sometimes, Margaret thought with a quiet smile, drama was exactly what was needed. Not the theatrical kind, but the kind that demanded truth, that refused to let injustice hide in silence, that loved fiercely enough to risk being called difficult. As the sun began to set over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold, Margaret felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was real. Emily's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and laughed. Derek wants to know if you'd come to dinner next Sunday. He's attempting to make pot roast. Margaret raised an eyebrow. Tempting? His words, not mine. Tell him I'll be there. And I'll bring dessert. As they walked back toward the subway, Margaret realized that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone isn't silence or space. Sometimes it's the courage to speak up, to stand firm, to be called dramatic when being quiet would be easier. Because love isn't always comfortable, but it should always be honest. If the story touched your heart, if you've ever been misunderstood for protecting someone you love, take a moment to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that standing up for what's right is never dramatic. It's just love. Subscribe to our channel for more stories about resilience, family, and the strength it takes to do the right thing even when you're standing alone. Drop a comment below telling us about a time you had to stand firm for someone you cared about, or suggest themes you'd like us to explore in future videos. Thank you for watching until the very end. Your support means everything, and remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to stay silent. See you in the next story.